Welcome to the second day. I hope you've recovered from dancing and singing last evening. So we're ready to get into another round of very interesting and important discussions in terms of our work on evaluation. Today's plenary question, which we asked our panelists to consider and respond to, is the following. Development pathways have had a hand in shaping the Anthropocene. Evaluation must consider the development impacts across all programs, and not only those addressing environment, climate, and food security. Is evaluation facing up to this reality? Before turning to our panelists to get their views on and response to these issues, I wanted for us to consider first what we mean by the Anthropocene. Let me, I'm sure many of you have seen in 2020, the Human Development Report from UNDP was entitled The Next Frontier, Human Development and the Anthropocene. And it was written at a time when COVID pandemic was at its height, killing tens of thousands around the world each day. And I'd like to quote briefly from the report, as the questions posed are very pertinent to us this morning. The report indicates, whether we wish it or not, a new normal is coming. COVID-19 is just the tip of the spear. Scientists generally believe that we are exiting the Holocene age, which spanned some 12,000 years, during which human civilization, as we know it, has come to be. They propose that we are now entering a new geologic epoch, the Anthropocene, in which humans are a dominant force shaping the future of the planet. The question is, what do we do with this new age? Do we choose, in the face of uncertain futures, to embark on new, bold paths that expand human freedoms while easing planetary pressures? Or do we choose to try and ultimately fail, to go back to business as usual and be swept away, ill-equipped and rudderless, into a dangerous unknown? So the report then goes on to propose steps towards a just transformation in the way we live, and to suggest new social norms, improved incentives, and working with, not against, nature. So in this Anthropocene age, there are additional burdens also on us as evaluators to consider the long-term environmental consequences of development, which is why we have assembled a distinguished panel of experts to walk us through the key issues this morning. So in order to move this forward, please, without further discussion from the moderator, let me call Indran Naidu to the podium. He's the director of the Independent Evaluation of Office of IFAD.
Very good morning, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, and the countless people we have online. A few opening remarks on this very pertinent topic. I think we all recognize the world has fundamentally changed. And as evaluators, we cannot be detached from this change. We have recognized that over the last 3 years, there's been major changes in our economies and societies in a very record time. Changes that normally would have happened over many centuries have now happened in a few years. And what it had really demonstrated is how fragile our economies and our societies are, and it has actually brought up and exacerbated the whole question of inequality. Now, from an evaluation perspective, how do we succeed in supporting the policymakers, the communities, in a way that helps to rebuild and to ensure that what is built is sustainable? The first point, and it's come through in the various sessions, is that our approach needs to be systematic and comprehensive. And what the COVID crisis has indicated is that the silo approach has not worked. There's been an inability to bring together the various agencies to help at the level of government to provide comprehensive services. And that is an indictment on the way governments and governance has been organized. The second point is the crisis has had a disproportionate impact on the marginalized, the poor, the rural. And voice was not obvious. So whereas many could continue working from home with technology, etc., others were simply left in poverty. There was nothing much they could do. And from an evaluation point of view, how do we come in a more political perspective, ensuring that the voices of the marginalized are amplified, that their values and worldview also become a subject of importance, that we move away from a largely ethnocentric, sometimes Eurocentric dominant worldview because the media is controlled in a certain way and you quite frankly forget about the majority of the world's population. It also means recognizing that there's the cultural and ethnic backgrounds, the variation means that we have to have a varied approach to development. And that means a varied approach to how we engage with evaluation. How do we capture this great diversity? And how do we simultaneously focus on issues of climate justice, recognizing that the problems that are faced by the poor and the marginalized have not been of their creation, but they have to experience the brunt of it. How do we ensure that there's a just transition in terms of the economies and the full range of sustainable development goals? The NEC conferences from Bangkok to Thailand to Egypt have focused on progress as far as the SDGs goes. We now have heard in this conference that the gains have been lost. And it's going to take a long time to get back to the baseline or what was expected. Evaluation comes in. From a rural-based perspective, and IFAD and the Rome-based agencies, we need to ask ourselves the transformative change. What are we looking at? And that means a fundamental shift in both governments and international agencies' paradigm on how they view development, a complete redefinition of development, and how do we measure development? We have all got quite embedded in certain paradigms and we take it for granted. But COVID have indicated everything needs to change because those paradigms did not help mitigate the crisis and help people to think. And that also means moving from a very anthropocentric approach, which in the evaluation literature has been quite dominant, to one that is more environmentally focused and bringing and amplifying marginal voices. And that really means very much that we need to become more activist in our perspectives, go in and try to bring about the changes that are necessary. With those few remarks, I hand you back to Alan, and we look forward to the comments and discussion that comes in. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Indran. You bring up a very important point for us on the issue of climate justice and a recognition that those who have altered the climate least are the ones who are suffering the consequences most. And how do we take that into account in our evaluation work? Next, I would like to ask Andrea Cook, our evaluation director from the World Food Programme, to join us also to give her remarks. Andrea.
So as we've been hearing, globally, progress towards achieving the Sustainable Development Goals is faltering. For WFP, Goal 210 hunger is particularly of concern, but we also see rising climate shocks and real challenges to the environmental integrity of our planet. Faced with these facts, we need to ask ourselves, how can evaluation contribute to transformative change to protect our people and planet and prosperity? This is actually something we've been working on since 2016 at the World Food Programme, when our evaluation function really pivoted to respond to Agenda 2030 and to start to look at how we would address these global and interlinked challenges. And I'd like to share with you some of the things we've been doing and thinking about in World Food Programme to show what this pivot means in practice. I'm not suggesting you follow our example, but I think as we're speaking to people that work within the evaluation sphere, giving you some practical examples of what this looks like for us at this moment in time might be interesting. So we introduced a new evaluation policy in 2016, and one of our key aims was to provide technical assistance to governments and national partners, really to support governments and countries to be in the driving seat of their own development, which is the main premise of Agenda 2030. We were also looking at finding ways for us to partner with national and regional evaluation institutions and partners to enhance evaluation capacities and to learn together how to do this important work. We're really glad that several of our partner governments with whom we've been working in the past few years are here and are sharing the results and lessons of this work in various sessions. So in this past 6 years, one of the things we did was to expand our range of evaluations and to put the spotlight really at the country level. Previously, we had a function which was very centralized and was doing a lot of the work at the kind of policy, strategic level for the organization with very limited coverage and very limited purchase on decisions that were being made at country level and in partnerships at country level. So we brought into focus decentralized evaluations, more joint and country-led evaluations. And together with the centralized evaluations, these have allowed us to go deeper and much further in delivering evidence for organizational learning and for decision-making in partnerships at the different levels, but really starting from the country level up rather than the other way around. We see this as a really valuable body of evidence that can be adapted and used to shed light on issues that cut across geographies and then to inform systemic change and strategic direction. And across WFP, there's been increasing recognition of the contribution of evaluation evidence and a growing culture and strengthened capacities right through the organization. A big step forwards this year was the agreement of our new strategic plan, which runs through to 2025, where evidence is now identified as one of the 6 enablers of performance in the organization, which really sets the stage for dialogue on evidence generation. And for us, what's very important is evidence use. So whilst increasing evaluation coverage has been important to build a bigger body and a more diverse body of evidence across geographies, our focus, which is reflected in our evaluation policy for 2022, which was just approved in February this year, is to increasingly direct ourselves to complex and critical issues dominating the world. So finding out how to bring inclusion, affected population's voice into evaluation processes, how to bring thinking on climate change and environmental issues into our evaluations, how to bring a food systems approach, and importantly, how to explore progress and integrating a humanitarian development and peace perspective in the work of the organization and our partnerships, which is often termed the working in the triple nexus. It's in these areas where we've been looking at how evidence comes together that explores the linkages, the synergies, and the trade-offs that are most relevant for achieving the SDGs and transformational change. And we're still in the early days of learning how to embed this within our evaluation work, because it's challenging to bring all the issues that we have to think about in evaluation into evaluation processes, which we already know are very sort of overloaded. You can't just keep adding more and more things onto the branches of the tree. So there is a real technical challenge for us as evaluators here and users of evaluation to work out what's really important and then instill that in the conduct of each and every evaluation, but also how we build that picture up in terms of how we build bodies of evidence. One of the things we found really helpful is system syncing. And we're finding this is really helpful in helping us to make these connections, mapping onto the bigger picture and adapting our work. So we've introduced systems approaches in our strategic and policy evaluations. For example, a recent strategic evaluation of WFP's response to emergencies took a systems and capacities approach, which has actually transformed the way the organization looks at how to deliver an effective emergency response in the face of rising challenges. In our country strategic plan evaluations, we've integrated environment inclusion considerations, and we're also seeking to understand how the humanitarian principles are being upheld and making sure that we mainstream that right through our evaluation work. And we're also adapting the United Nations Evaluation Group guidance on disability inclusion in evaluations to facilitate the integration of disability considerations in evaluation. Especially trying to bring in a perspective on disability, but looking through an intersectional approach and linking that to wider concerns around gender equality. We've started to merge evaluations in order to focus on complementarity and linkages and shared learning. We have an ongoing evaluation which is looking at the disaster risk reduction and the climate change policy of the organization, rather than doing, as we would have done in the past, 2 individual evaluations. These seem like small things, but this is what we're talking about, is how to sort of get to the grips of the challenge we face. And we're also investing more in formative and developmental evaluation, which we're finding is very powerful ways to bring stakeholders together to learn and to look forwards. So our recent evaluation of the COVID emergency response for the World Food Programme identified learning priorities and started to generate internal evidence to support the ongoing response to COVID, literally within months of the onset of the pandemic. We're also working to build a body of impact evaluation evidence for climate change and resilience, in recognition of the need for more evidence on WFP interventions, on the resilience of individuals, households, and communities, which is needed to better design and implement programs that simultaneously address the root causes of food insecurity and malnutrition, whilst meeting immediate food assistance needs. And we've got really interesting evaluations ongoing in Mali, Niger, Rwanda, and South Sudan. But to do that, we really had to make quite structural changes and look at the functioning and the financing of the evaluation function to deliver these evaluations that literally cut over many, many years. We've also launched a new series of impact evaluations this year to better understand how to design climate insurance programs in light of increasing incidence of floods and droughts. And again, these are challenging because you have to design them in advance of potential floods or drought situations. So it's requiring us to have anticipatory action in evaluation. We put in place basic designs. We work with national partners to have things ready that if a flood comes in or there's a drought, we're able to collect baseline information right at the beginning and also to be able to assess what's happening through the different stages of response and how people are experiencing the support that they get. And very importantly, we're experimenting with others, often in partnership with other agencies, to generate summaries of evidence, evaluation syntheses, and above all, user-friendly products to communicate to busy decision makers and contribute to global evidence. So stepping up our engagement in the global arena is also important, moving out of these evaluation conferences to engage with conferences and fora that bring together the policymakers. So last year, there was the UN Food Systems Summit in Italy and in New York. And there was also the COP Climate Conference in the UK. And that presented important opportunities for WFP, working with our Rome-based agency colleagues and Eval4 with Community of Practice, to bring together the global evaluation community to have dialogues around what was needed. And this resulted in increased recognition and an opening of space for collaboration and evaluation, which is now being explored in tracking the progress following on from the Food Systems Summit. And also, we're working with the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change Secretariat to look at how to start to evaluate what's happening at that level, because it's literally a vacuum for evaluation and the kind of issues that we're concerned about at the moment. And finally, I'd like to return to the subject of the conference, where WFP is increasingly engaged with a wide range of NECD-related events, partnering with governments and non-governmental actors around the world. This includes our support for scaling up country-led evaluations, and importantly, doing more joint evaluation with national governments, but also implementing partners to stimulate mutual learning and accountability. And the mutual learning is really, really important here. We're also committed to strengthening coordination and sharing knowledge as a result of the recommendations of the UNEG study on progress made in implementation of the 2014 UNGA resolution on evaluation capacities. And stimulated by this review, we just concluded, with the support of the CLEAR Anglophone Africa Centre, a period of internal reflection to capture the learning of the 22 initiatives that have been carried out by WFP in 25 countries since 2018 to inform the implementation of a renewed strategic direction on NECD. So in this period of complexity and crisis, the evidence will be needed more than ever. And we need to be more agile, and we need to continue to push ourselves to think out of the box, to come up with solutions that are contextually appropriate, timely, and take a wider systematic perspective. And above all, to be delivered in partnership so that we may realize the ambition of the 2030 agenda and respond to this increasingly fragmented and challenging world that we live in. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Andrea. Andrea brings to mind a very important part for all of us, and that is, how do we bring our evaluations out into the public discourse? Because we can't just be talking to ourselves. We have to be bringing these issues out so that the evidence that we provide actually gets taken up with policymakers. We had an opportunity with the UNDP Evaluation Office to sponsor a meeting together with the government of Nigeria over the high-level political forums this last summer, where we talked about energy and some of the energy challenges, access to energy challenges. And it was an opportunity for us to engage by talking about the energy evaluation that we also did and what those findings were that came up and how it's then relevant to the high-level political forums that were taking place. And I think that becomes another very interesting opportunity for us. We have to raise the attention to what we are coming up with. So next, please, we'd like to have Anastasia Aladasheva, the Impact Evaluation Officer and the Independent Evaluation Unit of the Green Climate Fund, to address us, please.
Thank you very much, Alan. I hope you can all hear me well. I'm a little bit nervous to speak among all these experts and distinguished speakers and heads of evaluation units. So I'll be using my cheat sheet quite often. My apologies. Thank you very much for inviting me. and for this conference organized by UNDP, Independent Evaluation Unit at the ILO venue in Turin. I represent the Independent Evaluation Unit of the Green Climate Fund, and we are based quite far. We are based in South Korea. We don't have any regional representation. So we are based in South Korea in Songdo. The Green Climate Fund was established as a result of the Paris Agreement, in which the nations agreed to limit the greenhouse gas emissions to reduce the risks of the climate change. In addition to reducing the greenhouse gas emissions, the GCF's mandate is to build resilience of the vulnerable populations to climate shocks. At the Independent Evaluation Unit, we look at the effectiveness and efficiency of the GCF investments for accountability and learning purposes. So in addition, we do corporate evaluations, but one of our programs, which I specifically represent here, is called the Learning Oriented Real-Time Impact Assessment Program, or Impact Evaluation Program, in short, LORTA, which was established in 2018. I will talk more about this program during one of the sessions this afternoon, but here would like to provide a wider picture of how we work and some of the lessons of our work. In LORTA, we provide capacity building in impact evaluations, and we help strengthen M&E systems of the entities accredited by the GCF with approved GCF funding. We have more than 20 country projects in our portfolio. We work with entities in Africa, Latin America, Asia, Caucasus, Central Asia, and so on. Let me provide you a few examples of our work. One of the impact evaluations that we are currently finalizing is the impact evaluation of the UNDP project funded by GCF and implemented in the southern regions of Bangladesh, called Enhancing Adaptive Capacities of Coastal Communities, especially women, to cope with climate change-induced salinity. Increased occurrence of the cyclones and other hazards is accelerating saltwater intrusion into the freshwater resources along Bangladesh coastlines, which are so much needed for the livelihoods. In this project, together with the project team, we look at the impact of the livelihood support and clean water solutions for women living in coastal areas. We look at the impact on various indicators, such as awareness of climate risks, changes in socioeconomic status, decision-making, social inclusion. Currently, at this specific point in time, end of October, November, we are collecting headline data in order to measure the short-term impacts of the project. Another example of our work is from so-called direct access entity based in Mexico that is called, and apologies for my bad Spanish, Fondo Mexicano para la Conservación de la Naturaleza, FMCN, with a mission to provide strategic, technical, and financial support to conserve Mexico's natural heritage. The project is called River Restoration for Climate Change Adaptation, RIOS, and is aimed at vulnerable populations in 2 Mexican watersheds. Extreme precipitations in the 2 basins targeted in this project may lead to flooding and landslides. This has implications for the populations that live in the lower parts of these basins. In this impact evaluation, the RIOS project team and the impact evaluation team are at the inception stage, trying to build a theory of change and make sure we can estimate impacts on relevant indicators. Both of these projects, although different in nature and implemented by the organizations of different scale, one is UNDP and another one is a national entity, target one main indicator: resilience of the local populations. These are the 2 examples from a larger portfolio that we manage. We closely work with country teams in UNDP, FAO, and smaller national and regional entities that work more closely with local populations, and which are nominated by the so-called national designated authorities, such as ministers of environment, for example. Some of the specific results from these evaluations, again, I will share in my presentation afternoon, but what I would like to touch upon here in this session, considering that we have speakers from different organizations whose experience is very valuable to us, is how interlinked the climate adaptation interventions and their impacts are with humanitarian and development goals. There are many questions that are still unanswered, and some of them we try to address. How can evidence from development interventions inform interventions in climate adaptation? Can the awareness of climate risks lead to changes in behavior? And me as a farmer, will I start adapting by using new agricultural practices if I know more about the climate risks? Is GCF finance gender inclusive? And we may know the results of our Bangladesh work very soon. Does GCF target the most vulnerable groups and those most in need? This interlinkage between climate finance, development, and humanitarian aid is quite important. So, for example, building a solar panel in eastern Ukraine may not be effective if it's going to be destroyed. Green energy solutions may provide labor opportunities for youth in a country such as Tunisia. So this humanitarian development and peace-building nexus, which implies that the work is needed to coherently address people's vulnerability, it seems like the climate angle needed to be added to this diagram, and impacts should be looked in multiple dimensions. In one of our evaluations in southern and central Zambia, where we look at the livelihood support for rural communities provided by UNDP and government of Zambia, we find, and which is not surprising to many of us here, that more than 1/3 of rural population targeted by GCF finance is food insecure. Can GCF solve that by itself, or is there a need for a more coherent response in these areas? So at the moment, we have more questions than answers, but just to end in a positive note, step by step, we may be able to answer each and many of them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anastasia. The Green Climate Fund has been a game changer, both in terms of the scope of finance that goes into programming for evaluation and, of course, climate-related issues, but also in the demand that they are placing upon us to really understand the impact of that work. And so we appreciate the work that is going on the projects that you have just mentioned. And it's something that we can see from UNDP in terms of how they're having to look at impact in a different way as part of their GCF programming portfolio. Next, I'd like to ask Bella Yusuf Yunusa, the Senior Technical Advisor for the Office of the Senior Special Assistant to the President on SDGs in the Government of Nigeria. Bella, can you join us?
Thank you, Alan, and a very good morning, Excellencies, colleagues. I bring warm greetings from the Office of the Senior Special Assistant to the President of Nigeria on Sustainable Development Goals. Recall that in 2015, world leaders envisioned a future that is economically sustainable, socially inclusive, and environmentally resilient. And that vision was expressed through the framing of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, 169 targets, and 230 key performance indicators. And broadly, that vision today became a universal call to action to end extreme poverty, safeguard our planet, and ensure all people enjoy peace and prosperity by the year 2030. And since that historic adoption, the federal government of Nigeria acted immediately in operationalizing the SDGs. And this happens with the timely establishment of the Office of the Senior Special Assistant to the President on Sustainable Development Goals to provide horizontal and vertical intergovernmental planning and coordination, representation and partnership building, resource mobilization and management, and monitoring, evaluation, and reporting for the SDGs. And as a government, once world leaders adopted the 2030, they set up the high-level political forum, which is a follow-up review mechanism to hold world leaders accountable for their commitment to the 2030 agenda. And the voluntary national reviews are more useful and helpful when they are evidence-based. And going by our mandate and guided by the evaluation literature, we felt that after implementing the Sustainable Development Goals for 4 to 5 years, we felt there is need to double check in line with the transformative promise of the 2030 agenda to leave no one behind. We needed to double check who is left behind and where do they exist within the Federal Republic. And so we commissioned a country-led independent evaluation of 3 priority SDGs. SDG 1 on no poverty, SDG 3 on quality, health and well-being, and SDG 4 on qualitative and inclusive education for all. And our approach has been, and tomorrow at a separate session, I will be discussing in detail our conceptual and methodological approach to doing this evaluation. But today I'll just, in line with the theme of this plenary, just talk on the overview of what we do and how we do that. So we commissioned the evaluation of SDG 3 and 4 eventually, because they are part of our national development aspiration. And we started the process in 2019. But then before then, in terms of institutionalizing the SDGs, we had in 2016-17 completely realigned our national statistical system with the requirements and indicators of the SDGs, because you need credible and timely data to be able to do evaluation. And so today, on annual basis, we will be able to report on the 230 key performance indicators through our own national statistical system. And so the idea around country-led evaluation is, like I've said, to double check and find out what is happening since we have implemented the SDGs for 4 to 5 years, and which the evaluation literature has confirmed that that is a good time to measure impact. We've just completed the exercise, and the report has just been, I think, launched last August. And then as evaluation commissioners, as well as evaluation users, we hope to use the key findings of this evaluation to strengthen policy formulation and implementation around the SDGs. And since 2016, the National Economic Recovery and Growth Plan, ERGP, which was a medium-term national development plan between 2017 to 2020, and then economic sustainability plan following COVID-19 pandemic of 2020. And now we have a national poverty reduction with growth strategy of 2021 to complement that. And now we have a new medium-term national development plan 2021 to 2025. They have all been aspired by the 3 dimensions of the SDGs, the economic, social, and environmental dimension. In other words, we have adequately mainstreamed the economic, social, and environmental dimensions of the SDGs into these national development plans. And to make sure that evaluation become institutionalized in the country, we have also launched last year the National Policy on Evaluation, so that the national policies that has mainstreamed the SDGs, and indeed the Africa's Union Agenda 2063, the Africa we want, we will be able to, through our national monitoring and evaluation system, monitor and report on this, the key performance indicators of these development plans. And the fact that they have adequately mainstreamed the SDGs, then we use some of these findings to strengthen our voluntary national review reporting. Broadly, as government evaluation commissioners and users of evaluation findings, we commission this country-led independent evaluation for learning, accountability, and evidence-based voluntary national review reporting. And so this is the story and the narrative around our initiative, the institutionalization of the SDGs. I don't know how much time I have, but I would like to quickly conclude here by saying that having conducted this 2 priority SDGs through a country-led approach that was using a whole of government and whole of society approaches involving all the critical stakeholders in the development space in the country, we are now also supporting and promoting as a country standalone resolution of the United Nations for country-led evaluation to strengthen voluntary national reviews reporting. And we encourage member states to help support this process. I thank you for your attention.
Bella, thank you. Very important point raised, and actually quite an uplifting discussion in terms of the extent to which the government of Nigeria is bringing evaluation into the national voluntary review and reporting process for the SDGs. And I think it is a great entry point for all of our countries. Because we've seen in the past, as the national voluntary reporting effort was moving forward, there was some weaknesses in those reports and a need for evaluation to take a look at it. And it's very important that we as evaluators are able to be in that space. So great to see what Nigeria is doing. We have one final presenter. So please welcome my good friend Olivier Cosset, who is the Senior Evaluator at the Food and Agricultural Organization of the UN.
Thank you, Alan, and good morning, everybody. I shouldn't be here. My director was supposed to come and be part of this very distinguished panel, and she fell sick. She had COVID, and she apologizes for not being able to be among you today. And she sent me, so that's what you got. Sorry about that. And I'm going to try and punch at the same level as the other distinguished panelists. I think evaluation is on a roll. Evaluation is really making headways, and when I started in this business, whenever I had to explain to somebody what I was doing, it would take me like 15 minutes to get the message across, and I would get all sorts of intrigued glances during that speech. It doesn't happen to me as often nowadays. I just say I'm an evaluator. People say, ah, yes. So something has changed. We now have evaluation policies, evaluation systems in pretty much every UN organizations that I know of, and developing also at the country level among our members. We have networks, we have guidelines by the thousands, norms and standards, even a UN resolution we can quote. So I think we've made a lot of progress. I also think that evaluation is getting wiser. I remember not so long ago a time when the RCT was still believed to be like some sort of gold standard. Nowadays, most people understand that each problem calls for a particular solution. Each question calls for a particular methodology, and usually throwing a variety of method at a problem is not a bad idea. So we are embracing multi-methods systems, and complexity, unpredictability. All this is very good. We're getting wiser. But I'm here not to congratulate ourselves, but rather to bring a word of caution. I believe that this might be a bit too good to be true. In June, there was one of these evaluation conferences that now happens all the time in Copenhagen, where Estelle Raimondo made a speech where she explained that apparently, based on a lot of data that I'm not able to present today, apparently evaluation, as it becomes more and more institutionalized, is also becoming less and less disruptive. That is to say, it all appears as if the price to pay to be part of the club, to be accepted, to be institutionalized, the price to pay is to soften the sharp edge of evaluation a little bit. And she was very eloquent here, and it really resonated with me because in FAO, we have a problem in the FAO Evaluation Office. We do have a problem that I want to talk about because I think it might resonate. with some of you. What she was talking about was that as we install a system that is totally institutionalized with rules and regulations, and we came to apply evaluation across the entirety of what we do. And in doing so, in trying to reach for 100% coverage, we lose on something. We lose on quality of evaluation. We lose on utility of evaluation, because not every program, not every domain requires a critical outlook and some evaluation. Some requires it more than others. So she was saying, by trying to go for coverage, we're losing on the utility of evaluation. And this is something that, as I said, resonates very much with us in FAO, where over the past few years, we've been faced with what people are now calling in my office a tsunami of evaluations, with like, we're churning them out like 50 or 70 per year. Doing 50 or 70 evaluation reports per year as a cost, of course, in terms of budget, capacity, and all that, but we can shoulder that. It also has a cost in terms of the quality, not just of the reports themselves, but also the quality of the exchange with the client, with management in FAO and program managers and FAO direction and management, because any organization has a limited capacity to listen, has a limited capacity to absorb critique. It's normal, So if we do too much evaluation, then our evaluations become just reports that stay on the shelves that people don't read and they don't act upon them. And even if you try to maintain good quality evaluations here or there, if those are mixed in a large number of average or low quality evaluations, they're going to be lost. They're not going to be seen. They're not going to be read. So this is the problem we have, a problem that Picciotto from the World Bank used to call the development of mindless evaluation machines. That is to say, evaluation systems that are operating through mechanical, they decide that everything has to be evaluated, and they apply the same questions and the same approaches across the entire portfolio. And in the end, they have very little utility in the results of this approach. So what are we doing in FAO to try and solve this? What we're trying to do is to do less evaluations and choose them better. Choose them so that they might have a greater chance of indeed changing something, indeed being listened. And that we might have a greater chance perhaps also to reach a decent quality level there. So this is very, very important also for us, because we act in FAO, because we act in agriculture, rural development, environmental protection, domains in which we have come to realize that evaluation has made less progress than in other sectors. If you compare agriculture with, for example, education or with health, you will see that all these things that I've been talking about, all this progress of evaluation in terms of methods, in terms of capacity, institutions, is late comparatively in agriculture and in the domains where we in FAO work. So we have a problem here, but we have also an opportunity. Why? Because rural development, environment, agriculture are sectors that employ a majority of the world population and lead to a very significant impact on climate change and plenty of other things. So these sectors are not like any sector. They are sectors that feed the world. Okay, and these sectors are late in this development of evaluation. So it's both a problem for us, because we need to do more and strengthen, I think, our national evaluation capacity development initiatives in that particular sector. But it's also an opportunity, because we can try and perhaps avoid some of the problems that other sectors have faced in having an evaluation that is, yes, accepted, yes, institutionalized, but at the cost of saying little. and not being disruptive. We can try and avoid that problem. And so my proposal, and I will stop here, is as in FAO, we try to do less evaluations. We also try to do that in order to have the capacity to do more cooperation with national authorities in their evaluations. So like everybody else in that sector, and we do that, of course, with our partners in IFAD and WFP quite often, we've tried to decolonize evaluation. That is to say, to do, for example, country program evaluation with national authority in the steering committee. So we have one in Gabon at the moment following that model, and we've done others in the past. We find this very useful. We want to go beyond that. We want to help nations evaluate their own programs. Recently, I was in Mozambique and for an FAO evaluation, and it was in food security, and the government told us that they were doing their own evaluation of their own food security programs, and they would really like us to meet with the evaluators. So we had 2 sessions of work with the national evaluators that were working on the evaluation of the Mozambique food security program. And it was really, really interesting at the inception and then towards the end. It was really interesting. Why? One, because they were clearly in need of help, because that was a large program and they were a bit intimidated. So they really needed a little bit of backstopping. So they benefited, I think, and they thanked us a lot for it. So that was, I guess, valorizing, but also because in that discussion, I found all the energy of evaluation, all the sharp edge of evaluation, all the debates, all the critical thinking. It was raw. It was really there. And, you know, this is something that I want to reconnect with. So what I'm saying is that as we try to develop our national evaluation capacity development program, and we're trying to launch or follow upon initiatives with other Rome-based agencies, as I said. For example, we've launched Eval Forward. I don't know if any of you know of that network. We try and generate in that network an honest discussion about evaluation in rural development, right? And so as we do these things, we need to, one, give a special focus on agriculture and rural development, because those are late and those are important sectors. 2, we need not to do too many evaluations. When you try to develop your own evaluation capacity nationally, please try and avoid these mindless evaluation machines that Picciotto was talking about. Try and choose your entry points, your evaluations, in a way that will create some buzz for you, that will create demand for your work, because it will be seen as useful and significant, not just, you know, churning them out. Right? So that's 2. 3, let's learn by doing. I think it's very good that we have all these training courses and evaluation capacity development initiatives. That's wonderful. Let's continue that. But as we do that, I think it would be nice also to try and do some very strong national evaluations. And so what I'm trying to say here is that if you have a need in that particular sector of agriculture, rural development, you want to evaluate a national program, or you think you want to do a good, meaningful, impactful evaluation, we stand ready to help you. Thank you so much.
A tsunami of evaluations. I think actually we have both problems. We have drought and flood. Because I think many of us will say, well, you know, I wish I had that problem, that I had enough opportunities to do evaluations in my country. Whereas in some situations, we are perhaps doing too many mindless machine evaluations. Thank you, Olivier, for those comments, because it is important for us to make sure that we don't overwhelm, that our evaluations are useful. We've heard it at UNDP that they actually counted up all of the recommendations across all these evaluations and say, we can't digest all of this. So how do we prioritize? How do we make sure that we have the important issues that they really need to tackle? And how do we recognize that in many cases, our ministries are not capable of taking on the kinds of recommendations that we are asking? And so I think those are very important parts of our work. The other yesterday, we talked a little bit about this draft Turin agenda, and hopefully you've had the chance to see online what we are doing with that, because the presentations today also build into some of what we are talking about there. We've included in the draft Turin agenda that national systems need to consistently consider environmental sustainability when evaluating policies, programs, or portfolios of work. And I think some of the discussion today certainly exemplify or support that idea. The agenda goes on to suggest that when we are talking about what we do next, we will strive to ensure evaluation systems take into account the potential and actual impact of all policies and programs on climate change, pollution, loss of biodiversity, ocean warming, acidification, deforestation, in order to avoid, mitigate, and address these crises affecting our planet and human development. That's a very ambitious striving, but I think when we look at this, what we know about the changes to our planet through this Anthropocene age, we certainly need to take into account all of these different important factors. Ladies and gentlemen, we have some time for question and answer for our panelists. And I already see one hand up, which is great, because we'll take the first three and then we'll move on to a next round. I think we have good time for at least 2 rounds. We have
Thank you, Mr. Fox. Congratulations. The conference is getting better and better. My name is Trajko Slaveski. I come from Skopje, Macedonia. I'm first of all university professor, economist. My second career is in politics. I served 4 years in government as a Minister of Development and Minister of Finance, but it was 2006 to 2009. And since my political career has reached a peak at that time, now I am the president of the city council of the capital of Skopje. Very good points have been made during the presentations. Congratulations to all the participants, but I have a question to the last speaker, Mr. Olivier Cossy. Having in mind the conflict between elected officials, institutions, etc., and these independent bodies like organizations, yours, and having in mind one of your points that evaluations should be left to the nations, first of all, and less evaluations should be better. Now I will remind you to the presentation of my colleague, the Deputy Minister in the Ministry of the Local Self-Government, who sat the very same chair as you yesterday, who pointed out an example of increasing of agricultural subsidies in Macedonia. It was back in 2006-2007, from 5 million euro in an economy at that time of 8 billion to 150 million with meager results. So my question is, having in mind your experience in the field, who will be in the best position to provide the best evaluation of this development, having in mind that the best evaluators of policies in politics, in democracies, are the voters, because, you know, governments led by populist measures will do something that might be beneficial for some interest groups, but not for the others. Thank you.
I think.
Yeah, I think.
Sorry, let me direct this from the podium so you can hear me. I think there was the next question that was in the back. And as I say, we'll take three and then we'll turn it to the response. And then the third one will be over here. Thank you.
Bonjour à tous, je suis India Issouf, directeur du suivi et évaluation au ministère du Plan de Développement de la Côte d'Ivoire. Je voudrais juste poser une question au dernier intervenant concernant la FAO. Il a lui-même dit que le secteur de l'agriculture est très en retard dans le domaine de l'évaluation, ce qui est tout à fait juste parce que dans nos pays qui sont des pays à vocation agricole, c'est le constat que nous faisons. Mais l'agriculture est, je dirais, l'un des seuls secteurs qui bénéficie, je dirais, de l'appui de 3 agences. Nous avons la FAO, nous avons le PAM et nous avons le FIDA. Pourquoi ne pas mutualiser les efforts entre ces différentes agences afin de permettre véritablement de pouvoir booster l'évaluation au niveau de ce secteur agricole? Parce qu'effectivement, il y a énormément d'investissements qui sont faits, mais il n'y a pas véritablement d'évaluation qui permettent de mesurer un peu l'efficacité de toutes les politiques et programmes que nous mettons en place dans nos différents pays. Merci.
Great. Sanjeev Sridhar from the Gates Foundation. Given the theme of this plenary, rethinking evaluation to address crisis, my question is a specific one on inequities. Far too often I hear, not just within this plenary, but outside, sort of lip service for inequities. My question to some of the panelists is, how has your organization rethought, and again, I stress the notion of rethinking evaluation, your own focus on inequities, given the centrality of inequities, both for SDG as well as for the impacts of the COVID story?
So let me turn to the panel. We've had our first 3 questions. The first one seemed to be directed especially to Olivier. Do you want to take that? But then we'll move from Indran down for the other responses.
Are these things working? Yes, they are. Thank you for the question. First of all, I would like to say that I think it's correct to state that policy evaluation is the hardest thing at the moment. It's a domain where perhaps the least progress has been made from a technical standpoint, from a methodological standpoint. It's far easier, as far as we know, to evaluate a program that delivers some sort of physical assistance or advice or anything like that, than to evaluate a policy, a new policy, for all sorts of reasons in which I could get into. But I think suffice to say that policy evaluation is the hardest thing to do at the moment, or the thing we have the least tools for. So I feel for you. Yesterday, there was a question asked to Sven on the evaluation system in Germany for their own, for the evaluation of their own policies. And very candidly he answered that, well, you know, they have more capacity, in fact, to evaluate development assistance from Germany to other states than to evaluate their own national policies. And this is very true in my own nation. So policy evaluation is the hardest thing to do at the moment. Then you said that in policy, the best evaluators are the voters. I would agree with you, with the caveat that, like any evaluator, the voters need to be well informed to be good evaluators. And so I would think that the role of the press, the role of the media, the role of evaluators, the role of scientists, of academics, of anybody that works in knowledge is very important here. Voters cannot be evaluators if they are misinformed. Thanks.
No, thank you very much. The direct response to the question. There was a recent study about collaboration between Rome-based agencies. And the high-level finding, there was very limited collaboration. And I think the same applies with the evaluation officers. We have started now engaging as the evaluation officers, and I'll ask them to speak, because in essence, the offering at a country level is from all three agencies, but we evaluate individually when the package is something that is comprehensive. And you need to look at the impact in the food and rural sector from all perspectives. It's an area in which there's work in progress, and I can't actually say that we've been successful so far in this regard. We do collaborate, obviously, as members of UNEG in terms of methodologically, but also the platform of GEI has brought us together and also encouraged us to now collaborate under this big umbrella so that we are not constantly exclusive in terms of our mandate, but really work at the interest of the country and the citizens. They do not see agencies from the perspective of the countries. They just see support. And this fetish that we have about turf and mandate is our own problem. It's something that we really need to deal with. I'll hand over to Andrea.
Yeah, thanks. I'll maybe comment a little bit on what Indran is discussing. So, you know, you have to look at sort of timeframes to start to address aspects of these challenges. So when Oscar was at IFAD with Massa, who is now here with WHO, but was at the time with FAO, and with myself in WFP, we decided in consultation with the executive boards and governing bodies of the three organizations to do this evaluation that looked at Rome-based agency collaboration. It looked at evaluation as one sort of small element of that. But we had also experimented with trying to bring together dialogue in country because we found ourselves in a situation a few years ago of doing three almost parallel evaluations in Cameroon. We seized that opportunity to work with the Ministry of Agriculture in Cameroon, the Ministry of Finance and Planning, and to actually bring this together. And we had a very constructive engagement through a multi-day sort of workshop where we, with the staff of our agencies, with colleagues from Ministry of Agriculture and other sectors where we work and other national collaborating partners, we were able to sit together and say, well, how do we try to work in a more collaborative and cooperative way in Cameroon? How can this work support and drive transformation in the agricultural sector and dealing with food security in Cameroon? I think it would be very interesting for us to look back, 3 or 4 years since to see what really changed. But one of the fundamental things we found, one of the issues that came out from the Rome-based agency evaluation as well, is we're often working in very different ways in different parts of the country, connecting with different elements of the agricultural system and food security systems. I talked earlier today about the Food Systems Summit that took place last year. That, I think, provides a very powerful impetus to start to bring things up at a higher level. So I do think it's important for us to be doing more as Rome-based agencies, but I don't think it's necessarily the agenda is about evaluating how Rome-based agencies come together. I think it's more about how the Rome-based agencies come together to support national country-led evaluation in the agriculture and food security sector, because I think that's what we really need to learn. The agency evaluation can sort of come in and look at what we're contributing, but the fulcrum of this effort really needs to be at the country level. So that's what I would advocate for. Also, the interesting thing for me from the Food Systems Summit was about the different stakeholders in the agricultural sector. and that we need sort of these different stakeholders to be coming together in multi-stakeholder coalitions to drive forwards the commitments that came out of the Food Systems Summit. And that isn't just people from international agencies at national government, it's farmers associations, it's the private sector, it's consumers. So again, the Food Systems Summit set out a whole range of sort of multi-stakeholder commitments to transform food systems at national level, but also at global level. And I look forward, they've been forming a food systems support hub in Rome over the course of this year. And I'm really looking forward to being able to engage with that, to then bring this effort together. So the Rome-based agencies are an important part of the picture, but we're not the only part of the picture. If I may, I'll talk also a little bit about the inequities issue. Our experience in WFP is, first of all, it's really important to be asking the right questions. So really starting to thread through questions about inequality, different dimensions of inequality, looking at inclusion. The other part is because we're primarily working in humanitarian space, where there are commitments to accountability to affected populations. We really try to bring into our evaluation work how we can effectively bring the views of affected populations into evaluation processes. That requires us to go a lot further in finding ways, often in very challenging settings where sometimes we can't even sort of get out and meet people, to try to find innovative ways to bring their views in through surveys, through other tools, to get their perspective of their lived experience of the humanitarian assistance they're receiving. And the other critical issue, as we found as we've started to ask these questions, is you start to reveal the data gaps. So over the time I've been with WFP, we've been sort of raising these questions. And with our new strategic plan, we now have a new sort of a results framework for the organization and a commitment to be collecting the right kind of data to allow us to get to those issues. But what we're collecting in the organization, again, rests on what is being collected in national systems. And that brings us back to the challenges that and opportunities that Bala was setting out this morning. So again, it brings us back, I think, to strengthening national capacities, not just in evaluation here, but in statistics and data collection, and making sure that the data is there, that then enables this this challenge to come through.
Anastasia, Bella.
Okay, thank you very much. I think there isn't direct questions to me, but just want to agree with Olivia on the issue around policy evaluation. It's quite difficult to do that, and that is why our experience of evaluating the SDGs in Nigeria is quite unique, because that is policy evaluation. And like I said, we will have opportunity later tomorrow to discuss our conceptual and methodological approaches, but also around the issue around the idea of leaving no one behind, which addresses the issues around the excluded, inequities and all that. We found out that while we were doing the voluntary national review for 2020, which was going almost concurrently with the evaluation of SDG 3 and 4 in Nigeria, we found out that we had the largest social investment program on the continent, but that through that review and the evaluation process, we realized that it wasn't going deep and far enough, and we took that key finding, and today there's certain percentage in the National Social Investment Program targeting persons living with disability in all the components. So that is the sort of useful insights from evaluation, voluntary national reviews for the SDGs. Thank you.
So ladies and gentlemen, I had promised more Q&A, but I'm also conscious of the time and the need for a photograph. And so as Richard mentioned when we got started, there is a request now that we all meet at the front because we will then go to the side of this building and show that we were all here together. By going to the side of the building, it means they can take the photograph from above and show all of us. So thanks, please, and a round of applause for our guest speakers. Thank you all for attending this morning. And yes, please, let's go outside and do the photograph. This can sometimes be a very complicated process, so please move along so we can get it done. Thank you.